Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Dave Baker, who is owner and clinical director at Complete Physio. Dave, how are you
Hi.
doing?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for asking me on.
Hey, no pleasure. So it's quite an interesting one for me because I know Chris, like your business partner, very well, and I've known him for
Mhm.
quite in depth over the years. You and I have exchanged a few emails on things here and there. I see your stuff on social media, but I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about your background, what it's like working with Chris Myers, which I can only imagine what that's like.
That might have to be a separate podcast. Do you do ones that go out late at night?
Hey, look, anything goes on this. Anything goes on it. So, yeah, the amount of stick Chris gives me, then I'm sure it's about time he got a little bit back. So yeah,
Yeah.
so no, that's good. So, I mean, I'm intrigued to know in terms of a bit about your background before we start. Then, so where are you from?
So I'm from Canvey Island in Essex, so Estuary, Essex. That was where I sort of grew up, and I guess, my route into physiotherapy was slightly a bit more sort of convoluted than some. So I actually sort of started out working in accountancy and small business accounting. And this was back in um, the 1990s recessions, so it wasn't a good time to be in small business accounting. And ended up working in capital accounts at a local hospital down in Thameside, yeah, which is out in Grays. So again, along that sort of estuary part of Essex, A13, if anyone knows that area. And I was working at a hospital capital accounts department, and I was working on a project where I was overseeing the building of a sensory perception centre, John Tallack Centre, which I believe is still there. And I saw physios at work, and that was it. I was like, I kind of already knew that I didn't see myself in accountancy for the long run. So I was sort of looking around at other ways, other career options and stuff like that. And I saw these physios working with some patients. I was really interested actually originally in head injuries. So throughout I went and worked as a physio assistant for a couple of years in a sort of Basildon hospital, but I was mainly based in the sort of neuro section because that was my interest. And all the way through university, I went to UEL, University of East London, and all the way through university, all the modules, all the options I took were all around sort of like head injury, stroke. That was my dissertation, was on the RNIU over at the Homerton. And yeah, I was fully signed up to neurophysio. That was my interest. It was just a sort of stopgap. I was waiting for a job to come up, post to come up, a senior two post to come up, and I ended up working in outpatients for 6 months just as a stopgap, and that was it. I never went back. So yeah, so it was certainly wasn't. I talked to lots of physios who were like, oh yeah, I want to be the next, like, Man United physio or this, that, and the other. But that was never on my radar at all. Never actually had any sort of interest in the whole sort of like sports physio side of it, which I gather is pretty sort of unusual, really. Unusual way in. So yeah, accountant to wannabe neurophysio, and this is where I've ended up.
Yeah, that's really interesting then. So I guess that's why that you do deal with a lot like the business side of things when we interacted on buying equipment or whatever it is. So I
Yeah.
guess that's like how has that helped in terms of now you've got on to run a business?
Yeah, I mean, obviously massively helpful because I've spent several years just looking at all different types of business as, a spreadsheet, balance sheet and P&L accounts for years. And so, and like all accountants, I love a Excel spreadsheet, and I love looking at graphs and numbers and trends and this, that, and the other. And I would still say to this day, probably if I was pushed, probably maths is probably my sort of, certainly sort of I'm a maths and science person above and beyond anything else. And probably my leanings probably mostly to do with maths, if anything. So yeah, so I've always liked that side of things. And I think if you've worked in small business accounting, you just get so used to looking at what a business looks like on a spreadsheet, on a profits and loss account, and this, that, and the other. It just becomes very much sort of second nature. And certainly in the time when I worked in the hospital, because I'd actually done management accounts in the hospital as well for a couple of years, and helping with like end of year reconciliations and stuff like that over in Basildon and Thurrock. So I was very familiar with sort of like the sort of hospital based management accounts. So yeah, so it definitely gave me a sort of unique selling point, I guess, to sort of managers and this, that, and the other, because I think it's the sort of thing that maybe a lot of physios are probably less comfortable with. And I think it's a bit of a cliche nowadays, isn't it? But like a lot of physios aren't particularly, or certainly traditionally weren't particularly sort of business minded and business savvy. Maybe that's starting to change nowadays, but a bit. But certainly traditionally a lot of physios didn't have any sort of training in that side of things. So yeah, it's definitely been useful. Yeah.
In terms of if you looking at your clinical skills and then those skills that you've got, like
Mm.
what percentage, if you had to give one in terms of ratio for the success, like Complete, from what I see, I've not seen your books or anything like that, but it looks like a really thriving, great company, growing. What percentage would you apportion to like the numbers bit of it through to the clinical piece?
What, in terms of making a success
Yeah, I know
of the
it's a very
business?
difficult question. If you were just giving like that, how much has that pushed you forward basically in terms of doing that bit
Um,
of it?
I think as things have grown, I think it certainly gave me the confidence and facilitated my confidence to grow, if you know what I mean. So like I could always look at the sort of projections of the numbers and how things were looking on an Excel spreadsheet, and it gave me that sort of confidence to know that we were able to expand and to sort of start upscaling, and when we were able to take on another administrator or another accounts per member of staff and stuff. So yeah, I was sort of very comfortable and confident with that side of things. So I guess it's sort of helped a lot along the way, just in terms of me knowing the way forward, as it were. It's certain now that we're obviously a lot bigger, then it's become a much bigger chunk of what I do, and I guess now we've got so much more data, management accounts, and that kind of thing, that and it's much more relevant, I guess, because I'm just a tiny part of the sort of clinical face of the business now. That obviously becomes more and more important and more relevant to me, looking at the sort of numbers side of things. So if anything, I feel like I'm going full circle, Andy. I feel like I'm going to ends up back in the where I thought sort of started off about 30 years ago, the way things are going.
Which maybe that's good as well. And so bearing in mind
Yeah.
you wanted to do neuro and then you'd come from
Yeah.
that. So what
Yeah.
happened after you graduated?
Yeah, so when I first graduated, I worked at the Homerton. I'd done a couple of placements there when I was a student at UEL. I really loved the Homerton. I thought they had some like really good managers there. Thought it was a very well run for, it's sort of, I guess, slightly in the shadows of, it's got the Royal London just up the road, and this kind of thing. But I definitely saw that they had some really good people in really key positions, like in some of the sort of manager and senior management roles associated with sort of physio. So I felt like it was a well-run department. I was very happy to go and work there. Again, the plan was probably to go and do my junior rotations there, and then I ended up being sort of working between the Homerton and sitting in Hackney PCT, which is sort of, for all intents and purposes, still part of the Homerton, for like 16, 17 years. And I really enjoyed it there. As I say, I never felt the real sort of push to leave. Every now and then you sort of thought, well, maybe it's time to just sort of go and work somewhere else and see something different. But by this time, the private side of what I was doing was already starting to build up quite nicely. So by the time it really felt like time to spread my wings, I just went off into full-time private, which was about 9 years ago now. So yeah, so I did about 16, 17 years in the NHS, not always full time. For the last few years, I was gradually sort of dropping my NHS hours and doing more and more in the private sector, and obviously building the business, helping to build Complete Physio up. But I was I was one of these bit of a Alan Shearer when it came to my physio career. I just stayed at one hospital for the whole time, so pretty boring from that perspective, I'm afraid.
Yeah, look, Alan Shearer, that's a good comparison for you. You know, the top scorer in the Premier League. Yeah, no, I like it.
Yeah, yeah.
So in terms of like Complete Physio then, so I think you graduated in 99 and then started only 6 years later from what I've seen on there. So like
Yeah.
what was the vision for Complete when you set that up?
So the vision for Complete was literally I was living in Kentish Town, and increasingly people were just asking, could I have a look at this? Could I have a look at that? I was getting approached frequently, as all physios do, I guess, when, particularly once they reach a certain point. And my wife, oh, well, my partner who was then, now my wife, she was like, don't know why you don't just get some cards printed and get a room somewhere and start actually charging and doing this properly. So I did, and we got a portable plinth, and we started renting out a room in a dance studio actually, in Kentish Town, and then eventually we took a room in an LA fitness gym. And I'll never forget standing in the gym, and the lady was going, right, so this room is £750 a month. And we were like, oh my God, like we've got we can be burdened with £750 a month rent to pay, oh my God. And I think by this time, I'd already sort of teamed up with Chris, I think, at this point. So I was working with Chris, and we were sort of talking about, sort of getting something together sort of privately. I'd sort of, been looking around and doing a few bits and pieces with a couple of other guys, but Chris was like, I could see he was like really like, yeah, I'm I want to do something, proper. I want to do something that's going to, eventually be sort of, big. I'm sure everyone says that and whatever at that point, don't they? But I think I thought, yeah, no, he's got some big ideas, and I think I think even then I was sort of thinking, do you know what? I think I could do this, I think I could actually build up my own practice sort of thing. So yeah, so we took on that, overhead of £750 a month, which I think I had a few sleepless nights about at the time. And yeah, I was just doing like a couple of evenings, a Saturday morning or whatever in this room, and me and Chris were sort of sharing the costs and the this and the that, and it just literally just all sort of started to build up from there. So that would have been probably around 2006, 2007 times. It was very sort of, it was very much kind of one man and a dog at that point. It wasn't huge amounts going on, but I think even back then we sort of kind of reckoned ourselves a little bit, I think.
Yeah, well, if you to start any business, it's difficult, isn't it? And you have got those overhead, and you even 750, which I'm sure,
Yeah.
compared to what you're paying now in the various locations, that's obviously nothing. But it's
Yeah.
like in terms of working with Chris. So do you work with Chris at Homerton then? And then is that where that relationship
Yeah,
has
so
come
we
from?
worked together. I think strictly speaking, it was City and Hackney PCT, but yeah, it was all part of that sort of like Homerton Trust or whatever that we were working together. So yeah, we crossed over. So we worked together. I don't know how long it was for. It was a couple of years, I guess, as extended scope practitioner physios at sitting in Hackney PCT. Yeah. So yeah, we were there together, and then he went off into sort of full-time private, sort of significantly earlier than I did. But yeah, we crossed over for a couple of years. Yeah.
And then in terms of the like for starting Complete, because again, I've only known
Yeah,
you guys really for the last sort of probably 5 or 6 years.
yeah,
So, like, well, what point did I mean, you were saying that you started to move over then, like 2009, and sort of maybe or 9 years ago, you've only really just started to sort of get into it then. So, like, what were your visions at that
yeah.
point? You already mentioned Chris had some big ones, but like, what did you envisage it being?
I just think fundamental, and I'm sure this theme will probably come up at other points during our conversation, but fundamentally, I still believe to this day that physiotherapy, in if you just go back to absolutely basic principles, has got to be one of the most important and I think it's one of the best possible professions. If you just forget the word physiotherapy or anything like that, you've got someone coming to you saying, I can't run anymore. Running is really important to me. How can I get back running? And I think one of the things that's always transcended my thoughts around the whole like extended scope and everything like that is, you know, what is there to say that there are any barriers on the way you should think about how this person can achieve their goals, if you like? Yeah. So if you assess them and then you go, do you know what, mate? If you're ever going to get back running again, you need surgery. You send them to a surgeon. Whatever you find, your job is to sort of facilitate them overcoming those barriers to get back to doing what they're doing. And for me, it's the same basic principle, whether it's getting back to running, maybe an older person getting to and from the shops, maybe someone who's had a stroke getting in and out of bed. Basically, we're here for someone to tell us that they've got some sort of functional difficulty, and we can use anything under the sun, really, to try to help them to get back doing it. And I think if you just look at the role of a physiotherapist in those terms, then I think it's potentially one of the most exciting, the most invigorating, and one of the most special professions on the that there is. And so that's always just the way that I've always sort of thought about it, is like physio, but with no barriers, no restrictions, and this, that, and the other. And I think that's always been a driving force for me in terms of trying to sort of ensure that physio. So when it was like the whole thing to do with the prescribing, I'm sure you're aware that I was banging the drum about physios getting prescribing rights, and joined in with the CSP for some years, helping to sort of work on that sort of project. And obviously, eventually we had sort of amazing success with that. But when it boiled down to it, as a physiotherapist, when I first joined the physiotherapy profession, I was really disappointed to learn that physiotherapists knew so little about medication. I just couldn't get my head around it. I was working in a hospital, and you say like your story's made of moments, and I can just remember one time talking to a physio colleague and sort of asking them, we went up into the ward, the patient couldn't get out of bed and said they were in too much pain to get out of bed, and I was sort of like, so right, so how do we remedy how do we remedy this? How do we get round this? And they're like, well, I don't know, don't really do anything about medications, just like, let the doctors know. And honestly, that just really took the wind out of my sails for a minute. I was just like, no, I can't get excited by this sort of computer says no, we're just going to hand it over to someone else. Like, surely, if you're dealing day in, day out with people that are in pain, and pain oftentimes being the biggest barrier to someone's being able to do what they want to do, whether it's just in its purest sense, I'm in too much pain to get out of bed, or in a runner who says I'm getting pain after I run, and bit of pain when I run, pain for a few days afterwards, whatever. Surely we have got to have a pretty good knowledge around everything under the sun that deals with pain, and obviously pain control medication being a big chunk of that in this world that we currently live in. So I couldn't wrap my head around that. I was very dissatisfied with that. And I just, immediately started rattling on the door of anyone at CSP that being sort of told, initially sort of go away, little, band 5, what you going on about sort of thing. And then eventually, obviously, the whole thing about non-medical prescribing gradually started to gather some momentum. And luckily for me, I hadn't annoyed anyone too much. And they were like, would you like to get involved in this? Would you like to be part of this? I'd actually, in the meantime, I'd actually done as many courses as I could as a non-physio. So I was working in A&E by this point, and I was actually doing pharmacology and clinical practice training because, we didn't have the rights to go on to non-medical prescribing courses at that time. So I was just doing, the sort of what I perceived to be the next best thing. So at least I understood the medication. At least I could advise patients about medication. And yeah, for years, I developed a course, and I still run it to this day. I've run this course. I've run this course 130 times since I think it's I think the first year I ran it was 2011. I think I've run this course 130 times, which is pretty good going. And it's basically educating physios. I don't just teach it to physios. I've taught it many, many times to osteos, chiros, all sorts of people working in MSK about how to advise patients about medications as a non-prescriber within your sort of like scope of practice, etc. And I've run that course 130 times. And obviously now there's so many physio prescribers, it's starting to become redundant, and I'm glad of that. I'm glad the day that course becomes irrelevant, I'll be like, I'm done. Don't need to run this anymore, because there's so many people out there that can disseminate this information, and there's, this has all become just, general knowledge of a physio, and that would be great as far as I'm concerned. So that was another example of me getting a bee in my bonnet about something, but it all stems back to the same thing. And I have this conversation with Chris as well, and that is to develop a practice. If you ask me what Complete Physio is about, Complete Physio is we've tried to design a practice that we would want to work in. And I think one of the things that myself and Chris and other sort of people at Complete Physio that we really share, and that is, there's nothing worse when you speak to someone and they've had a bad experience of physiotherapy. We've all done it. We've been at a party or something, and someone finds out you're a physio, and they're like, oh yeah, I went to see a physio. They gave me a sheet of exercises, or or some really, really like underwhelming kind of thing. And that just, as I say, to me, I just find that so sort of sad to hear. Not, I'm not saying that a sheet of exercises isn't appropriate in some instances, but just the fact that somehow the joy and the passion that I think physios should have seems to have left a lot of people, whether that's because of the pressures and the environment that they work in or whatever. But I just still think that it's such an amazing thing to be involved in, and should always be seen. And that sounds a bit of a cliche, but it's a privilege to have that role in people's lives. And I think that's really got lost somewhere along the line. And when I sort of hear about, all this sort of stuff about, kind of people being sort of called into like some sort of like auditorium and given some sort of like real sort of basic information about a condition, and then sort of all sort of like leaving again, and that's the new way of physiotherapy. It just, a little bit of me dies, Andy, when I hear that. A little bit of me dies, because I just think it is the most amazing profession in the world, and I just think we've somehow managed to lose the essence of what it is that we actually do. And it's been sort of yeah, and I find that very, very sad that that's happened. But anyway, we've created this little microcosm of Complete Physio, and hopefully we are sort of like managing to at least have a group of people there. I'm not for 1 second suggesting that this only exists within Complete Physio, but certainly lots of other people that I know that run private practices as well. They've got hopefully the same mindset that this is an amazing thing that we do. Don't put any sort of restrictions or boundaries or whatever on your school. Our job is to find out the best way to get people back. So when we're looking at the research, don't forget what it is that you're actually trying to do. You're trying to work out what is the best way, what is the best exercise program, what is the most efficient way of actually getting this person back to doing what they do. And I think if we always sort of think about it like that, we won't go too far wrong.
Well, where do you think that things have started to go wrong then? Like, well, where do you see, are you talking about in general in the market, you're talking about private, NHS, or in general?
I guess a lot of these pressures are probably just financial pressures if we're talking about, when I first qualified as a physio, I think you used to get like 6, 8, 10 sessions with every patient. And so there was an opportunity to build that relationship. There was an opportunity to assess someone thoroughly. But, the way I always see it, while you assess, you treat, while you treat, you assess. So it's like an ongoing thing, isn't it? Like if I'm having a bit of work done around my house, the first patient sometimes goes, can you give me the best exercises for this thing in a one-off thing? And I'm like, you probably wouldn't even want me to do that because there would be an element of that would be guesswork. I can give you the best prototype and then we get you back in again and we see what's working, what's not working, and we need to build on them. If I get an architect come round and say, right, how are we going to build this extension on your house? I want to see a few different drawings. I want to change my mind and I want to work with them in collaboration to work out, and they need to get to know me, I need to get to know them, and between us we will come up with the best plan. And so the idea that somebody can sort of meet someone once, give them a sheet of exercises, go, oh, and if it doesn't work, then go back and see your GP in 6 months' time or whatever. I understand that there's time pressures, and I guess probably for me, that's why I probably, my mindset probably doesn't fit with, dare I say it, the NHS model where there are those constraints on what you can do. Because I feel that there needs to be a little bit more of an evolution in terms of how you work with your patients to develop that, and also to work out what's working, what's not working, and all those little sort of nuances as you go along.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a massive shift. Well, historically, I did most of my work with tech and education was in the NHS and some sport, as we would maintain the sport bit. But in the last 6, 7 years, COVID's made a big difference as well. It's so much more in the private sector, and companies like, I mean, there's not that many that do exactly what you guys do, but there's so much growth in that private sector. So it is giving different opportunities for people that are out there. So how do you, because you've spoken so glowingly about the profession and the opportunities with things, but I agree, and I agree with that, but I also agree that there is a slight negativity in the market. There's different sort of people look at it, critical lenses, and there's a lot of change going on, and CSP get under fire from different organizations and so on. So like how do you, it's a big one for you to solve now, but like how do you think we can move forward with it? Because I agree, those events that you're talking about where you go and sit in a room and you get talked at, that's not inspiring for me in there. It's like how do we transition from that?
I think part of it is about engaging with technology. So I guess this will bring us in a little bit into the whole ultrasound thing. So again, if I talk about the moments that kind of got me thinking about ultrasound, I can remember talking to sort of colleagues of mine that worked in various different sectors, banking, this, that, the other, and then they'll go and see the physio, and the physio is like prodding them on their shoulder and going, well, it could be this, it could be that. this, that, and the other, but we don't really know, so we're going to try this. And just that whole, why was physio so low tech for so long? You know, like why you walk through a hospital and there were all these machines and flashing lights and everything like that, and then the physio department was a couple of plinths and some wheat packs, and you're just like, hold on a minute, like why aren't we engaging? Why aren't we embracing like technology? And if it's possible to know what is going on under the skin, why aren't we doing that? So as soon as I got wind of, and you know, I thank John Leddy for really kind of, he wrote a piece in Frontline back in, I think it's about 2004, 2005, which really sort of paved my way, and also Chris and a number of other people, to really getting interested in ultrasound. But I think my thing was, why wouldn't we? Like, if the technology is there, why wouldn't we use it? And like, if we've got anything that can provide us with more robust, objective information from day one, why the heck aren't we using it? And I remember as well that just around about that time, I was working still in A&E, and we had a Aussie registrar, and once or twice, like, shoulders came in to A&E or whatever, and he was like, "Oh, can we send this guy around for an ultrasound scan?" And then people were like, "Ultrasound? Do you mean like X-ray or MRI?" And he's like, "No, no, no, ultrasound. We know, when I worked, the hospital I worked in, we said." So then we're like, right, so MSK ultrasound can be used to diagnose at point of care. Oh, right, I get it. And then just for me, it was just like, why on earth is this just not done always? Like, you know, and then I know there's this whole sort of there was this whole sort of counter pressure, certainly when we first started out. You know, there's this whole sort of like, you know, move away from diagnostics, don't ever over medicalize things or whatever. But again, I just come back to fundamental basic principles. And that is, if there is knowledge or information there that can be easily had, why wouldn't you have it? Like, you know, if you're somebody who, you know, it's like the sort of the classic male, isn't it, that doesn't go along to the GP to get their symptoms checked out, like putting your head in the sand sort of thing. And I can't get my head around the fact that if you can really quickly and easily know what's going on inside your shoulder, for example, or wherever it may be, that it is not advantageous and worthwhile to find out. All these conversations about, oh yeah, but then you risk over medicalizing, you'll risk anxiety or whatever. That's almost like that's in the context, to me, that's in the context of how you deal with it. But first of all, I think we have to accept that if information is easily available, it's better for us to have it. And I think that since ultrasound is being now becoming much, much more commonplace, as a profession, our whole understanding, our whole appreciation of like normal variation, normal structural abnormality, symptomatic versus asymptomatic structural abnormality has completely changed. So yeah, maybe for a short time we had to, you know, you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelette. Maybe for a short time we risked over medicalizing things, but I think we very quickly came out the other side of that. And I think that actually now, and I talk to so many, you know, colleagues, and they say, "Oh yeah, you do ultrasound because it's going to be a prerequisite for injecting everything." It's like, no, opposite. Actually, people come to me for an ultrasound, and more often than not, I'm like, you don't actually need an injection. You know, what you need is some good structured rehabilitation, whatever. It's all in the context of how you deliver that information. And I will never feel that I don't think I can ever accept the fact that knowledge and information is a negative thing. It can be used in a negative way. I accept that, but fundamentally, knowledge and information has got to be a positive thing. And so, you know, and I've even in the early days when, you know, we used to go on Twitter and social media and talking about ultrasound, and everyone's like, oh no, you're just over medicalized and everything. People don't need scans. It's not going to change what you do, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, now we've like all matured a little bit more of a profession, and we've all learned to sort of like integrate this into our practice and everything like that. I think we can all now see that actually it's opening up so many opportunities, and and actually to be able to diagnose at that level so early on, and triage people, if you like, into the correct sort of treatment pathways, and let them know early on, actually, do you know what, you just need to go and see a surgeon, or do you know what, actually this is, you know, completely normal for your age and it will respond really well to rehab. And you know, I think that I'm really, really glad, and you know, something that obviously I'm very, very passionate about. We got 70 odd delegates this year at Brunel doing our PG cert in ultrasound, and that to me just, you know, just speaks volumes about, you know, where this is all sort of heading. Yeah, and I just think that, I'm not saying it's the be all and end all, but I just see ultrasound as another tool, if you like. So I just come back to base principles. Physiotherapy is a profession whereby someone comes to us with a problem, we try and work out what's going on, we try and fix that problem. And being able to see inside that person and see what that problem actually looks like, or to say, do you know what, that knotted muscle or that thing that you said actually looks fine. Crack on with some exercise, go off and do this, go off and do that. The power that that brings in at such an early stage, plus or minus other bits, because hopefully there's lots more tech that we can add into physio as well. And you know, I love the fact that so much more objective testing and the, you know, the force plate analysis and all this sort of stuff. I love all that because I just think that, you know, the profession desperately needs more objective testing, and a mind shift in kind of like this, just, you know, what we're doing is we're analyzing, we're stripping this problem down, we're saying, do you know what, you've just got lots of risk factors for injury, except actually we're seeing you after you've actually got injured, but you were carrying a lot of these risk factors anyway. So we're going to sort this immediate problem out, but while we're at it, you need to just a complete retune of your muscle length and strength relationships around, you know, lower limb stuff and everything like that. And I just, yeah, that sort of excites me, that we are going in that direction as a profession, because to me it brings us back to this idea of, right, we've got medications that, if required, rarely are they required, but if required, we can do that. Deprescribing wasn't even a word until, like, you know, dare I say, a lot more non-medical prescribers were getting on the prescribing bandwagon and actually started seeing these patients that had just accumulated loads and loads and loads of medications, to the point where the medications are actually becoming a significant part of the problem. And, you know, I can remember presenting at CSP Congress back in, I think it was like 2013. And I was up there talking about non-medical prescribing. I said, do you know what? We have, in like the 9 months that we'd audited our pain and function clinics, as they were called then, Chris will remember them. They're basically, which was basically a medicines usage review. We'd actually stopped way more medications than we'd actually started them on. So we were there as prescribers. Patients used to walk in, first thing they'd say is, oh, what medicines can you prescribe me to get rid of my pain? And then inadvertently, we actually gradually turned into this de-prescribing clinic, where we ended up actually taking patients off loads and loads of medications. And I'm fine with that. We didn't know that was gonna, I didn't know that was gonna happen. I certainly didn't train as a prescriber thinking, oh, I'm going to take loads of people off their medication. But that's what naturally happened when we were put in that position, with a physio mindset of, there's lots of different tools that we can use to fix this person. And actually the medications they're taking are doing them more harm than good. I know, let's get rid of a few of them. And that's basically how that sort of, how that part of my sort of thing panned out. And I say I see so many parallels with the whole thing about, so when we were first talking about physios doing prescribing, they were like, oh, there's too many people on opioids as it is. It's just going to open the floodgates. It's going to be more and more people on opioids. Just about every physio prescriber that I know, actually spends more time, trying to get people off opioids than prescribing them. I don't know many physios that are going around sticking loads of patients on opioid medication. So I think, the proof of the pudding has very much been in the eating. Is we're giving physios these tools, and we're seeing what they do with them. And we've given physios the tools of ultrasounds, and again, we're seeing lots and lots of fantastic, innovative work going on with physios. We've just got this new toy that they can use, and some fantastic, I love, catching up with, some of the alumni. We're always encouraging our alumni at Brunel to come back and give talks, and some absolutely amazing work going on, whether it be research-based, innovative ways of using ultrasounds as part of people's rehabilitation, the way it's being used in different patient pathways, in terms of like shortening people's pathways, fast tracking them to the appropriate treatment and stuff. I mean, it's, fantastic. And I'm just waiting for the next thing to come along, Andy. I'm not done yet. I've got another couple of innovations in me before I hang my boots up.
We'll see what we can come up with then to help keep you interested in all of it. So in terms of that then, like, what do you say that was really helpful in terms of all that information that you've talked about there? It's really good to get your direct perspective on it. But where do you see it going? Like 70 is an amazing number, but that in proportion to the physio population is obviously small, as there's a load of physios out there. So where do you see the potential, like the size of it, in terms of the opportunities and in terms of numbers? Like, what proportion do you see starting to use it?
I make no secret of the facts, and I've said it for years. For me, I would like every every physio working in MSK outpatients. Plus, obviously now they're using them in ultrasound in respiratory and all walks of life. So I can't, if you like, talk specifically about the other areas within physio, but certainly in medicine. I mean, ultrasound is just mushrooming. Everything is done ultrasound guided. It's being used constantly in A&E, and again, people are just coming up with lots and lots of different, even innovative ideas of how it can be used, how it can improve patient care. But purely from the bit that I know, personally, I would, relish seeing every single MSK physio being able to scan. And I would not be surprised if in not too distant future, it doesn't become sort of part of the undergrad, curriculum. Obviously at the moment, they just don't have enough people, enough mentors, enough people to teach it. But I think sports and exercise medicine consultants, physios, everyone who does MSK, I know it's a bit of a cliche now, but it's like the 21st century stethoscope, isn't it, as they call it, ultrasound. Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be just used by everyone? Why, everyone be, comfortable in using it and can draw upon that tech at any point that they wish to, as part of, and things are moving forward so rapidly at the moment with like AI and whatever, AI being integrated into like ultrasound. So I'm sure very, very soon, well, they've already got AI within ultrasound, so it can recognize a lot of the sort of anatomy and this kind of thing. So it's going to race forward at a rate of knots now, isn't it? And I just think that it's great in terms of like, diagnosing, early diagnosis, which then shapes that sort of patient pathway. So I'd as I say, obviously the financial side of it's going to take time, but obviously now these handheld machines are getting so much cheaper and so much, the quality of them is getting so much better that I think in a few years' time we will see, a large chunk of certainly newly qualified physios getting to grips with ultrasound very, very early in their career. And I think, the universities will get wind of this and start bringing it into the sort of undergrad training. And I think that'd be great.
Yeah,
I love
that's
it.
really interesting.
I love to bump into someone at a party and say, oh, I went to see a physio, and go, oh yeah, did you? So yeah. So in my first appointment, he did a diagnostic ultrasound. He was able to show me exact images of exactly what was going on in my shoulder. And from there was able to put together, he walked me out, took me into the gym. We did all this testing on all these plates. He's giving me all these beautiful graphs showing me which muscles are out of kilter, what bits I need to strengthen up and everything like that. I know exactly what my diagnosis is. I know exactly what I need to do, and I know exactly how long it's going to take me to get better. And when I start hearing that at parties, then I feel a lot more satisfied about being a physio.
Let's get you to some parties then. Let's get you to some parties and figure that out.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, he prescribed me some drugs as well, if I need them. Oh, actually, no, he didn't. He took me off some drugs.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, it's really interesting to hear your perspective on it. And in terms of setting up the courses then, so you talked about the one that you're involved in there. I've always been intrigued as to you and Chris are doing Complete, but then you've got your own things going on with Smug and the ultrasound site. So how does that work?
Yeah, no one deserves to work with Chris all the time, surely. No, so I mean, it just comes out of the fact I get asked this so often, as you can imagine. Basically, when we were both sort of learning ultrasound very, very early on at the same sort of time at City and Hackney and everything like that. And Chris started running a few sort of just one day intro, and we started myself and Rob Mast and Stu were just putting on very similar things. And it was all very much sort of one man and a dog, little bit of, I think Chris was sort of bolting a bit of ultrasound into some shoulder course that he was running and this, that, and the other. And it was all very, very sort of, low key, kind of small numbers and everything like that. I've got we were looking at some of the photos, myself, Stu and Chris, Stu and Rob, who I do most of my teaching, some of the photos from some of our early courses, and it's absolutely ridiculous, overhead projector, 4 people round an ultrasound machine. And then I look at what we're doing now, it's crazy. So it just grew up and expanded. So Chris was doing his Smug thing, we were doing our ultrasound site thing, and the two things have just got really, really big, which is fantastic. Obviously Smug do some fantastic stuff. I like to think that we do too. I think we probably got slightly different flavors, if you like, to the way that we do it, and that's great. It's good for people that are learning ultrasound, that we've got multiple providers of education and so forth. So I think that's got to be a positive thing, really. That's how that's evolved.
Yeah.
So I know it looks really strange, and people sort of say to me, well, hold a minute, your business partner's Chris, but doesn't and it's it's just one of those weird things. And again, it's we were talking about this the other day, because we've been actually working and doing Complete Physio together for about it's coming up for 20 years now. And it's just it works. So just don't think about it too much. Don't question it. Don't question it.
And you say you got slightly different flavors of the way that you do it, but what would what are your concerns around the growth of ultrasound within MSK?
My concerns, I guess my only concerns just generally is that ultrasound is a hard skill to learn, and I think a lot of people pick it up, have a little bit of a dabble, and I think there is now almost a sense, I think a lot of people feel that they've kind of almost like got to learn it. They feel that there's almost like a pressure, an expectation to learn it. It takes a long time. So you again, tired cliche, but people oftentimes say it's like learning a musical instrument. It's going to take you, years to get decent at it. You never fully master it, and you'll probably get good at some bits of it. You'll probably be really good at like shoulders and muscle scanning, but you might not be so brilliant at the hips and this, that, and the other. And so there's lots of parallels that people sort of draw to musical, and it's a very easy thing to do wrong or badly. So I guess my concern about the growth of ultrasound, if I've got any concerns, is people sort of pick it up, learn it a little bit, and then sort of disengage, don't do any CPD, sort of drift off into the sort of ether, and and just don't really continue to develop their skills. I think it's really important that there is a lot of learning resources out there, that there are these courses, and that these courses are perceived to be engaging and fun to go on, and this sort of thing, so that we developed, and certainly something that we do, and I know Chris does the same, we really try to engage the sort of ultrasound community. We've got Facebook groups, we've got this, we've got that, we run alumni sessions and all this sort of thing, because we're very aware of the fact, rather like non-medical prescribing, that a lot of people get their qualification, there is no actual sort of medico-legal requirement, if you like, to continue to learn and develop. And it's, I guess, putting it in the context that even when you get your PG cert, it means that you have acquired a level of competency, and you need to be aware of your own knowledge gaps. You need to be aware of areas that you need to continue to learn and develop, because no one's coming off a PG cert as a perfect MSK sonographer. And so it's really important that people have that appreciation of where they are. And so that's my fear, as it were, is people underestimating how much sort of time they need to put into it, and the need to be constantly sort of questioning and self-appraising about what they're doing, because it's very easy to do it wrong, or to do it badly, and you can make anything look like pathology very, very easily. So you're going to run the risk of over-diagnosing pathology. So it's really important that you have some sort of ongoing mentoring, or some regular sort of CPD, I would say, so that you can sort of keep yourself in check, and make sure that you're constantly updating your skills. But we've moved from a time when we first were training in ultrasound. I think there was one or two websites. Ultrasound Cases was one of the websites, and it had about 5 ultrasounds, MSK sort of patient cases on there. And you think about what you've got now, you've got like thousands of hours of YouTube channel, of I don't know how many different websites with I don't know how many different, you've got people posting like amazing like case studies constantly on like Twitter and LinkedIn and everything like that. And I think the energy, I think the passion that people have for this, again, I find really, really invigorating in itself. And people really get into ultrasound, they get very passionate about it, and people giving up huge amounts of time to put all this material and information out there. I think is fantastic.
Yeah. No, it's really good. And again, it's been really exciting for us to get involved in it, because it was relatively new to us, although we've been doing it for 6 odd years now.
Yeah.
But it's great to see the work that you guys are doing. You see so much demand. I mean, we've doubled our size of ultrasound this year, and it's we can only do it by pointing people in your direction, Smug's direction, and trying to help with that pathway. So it's
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that collaborative approach, is that we can all get to that point, and I agree that that vision of the party that you mentioned there, that's what we'd love to be able to help with, that trajectory of things as well.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's just really, I really appreciate you sharing your story on that, and
Yeah.
it was good to hear it. And like, what any one like takeaway that you would say to people who are watching that you would recommend?
Um, People that are thinking of taking up ultrasound or just
I'll leave it
physios
open
generally.
to anything really. Any suppose any people within their healthcare journey.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say a shout out to physios. I'd just say, remember why you became a physio and just remember the passion and the drive. And, when you were like that first year student and it all just seemed so exciting and everything like that. And as I say, it breaks my heart to sort of hear about how many people leave the profession now and how many people are frustrated and disillusioned and everything. But, we can all be part of that process of making our profession what it fundamentally is. And I've already said what I think our profession is, so I won't say it again, but that is what we're about. We're just, forget about, don't even, not even physiotherapists. We are just people that people come to when they need to get back to doing something. And our job is to work out how they can get back to doing it. And don't ever lose that passion, because it is a very, very special job for anyone to do. And ultrasound, I've seen so many people that were starting to lose that passion a little bit. And we have so many people on our courses that say, I would have left the physio profession. And I probably put myself in that bracket as well. I think I would have struggled to still be a physio now if I hadn't come across ultrasound, amongst other things. But probably ultrasound's been one of the biggest turning points for me. So many people on our courses, so many physios that I know that just said it has completely reinvigorated my passion, my love for every single aspect, the nuts and bolts of physio, anatomy, pathology, the whole sort of thing. And it's weird how it does it, because you might go, oh, it's just like a machine with a probe, you whatever, but it completely reinvigorates people's passion for this profession. And so because it does do that, I'm absolutely 1000% behind it, and I'm really sort of pushing it. And I really hope that anyone who's sort of like going, do you know what, I don't know if I can do physio anymore. I feel like I've sort of learned everything there is to learn. I feel like I'm sort of falling out of love with it. My suggestion is give ultrasound a try, because it might just change your mind.
I like it. I think
Yeah.
we're going to use that in our sales material. That like we got
Yeah, yeah,
Dave
yeah, yeah.
Baker.
Yeah, you can have that one.
Well, Dave, really appreciate your insight on that. It's really great to
Yeah,
hear your journey through it and the absolute passion that you're talking about
yeah,
not only ultrasound, but just the profession in general
yeah,
and all the tools there. So thank you for doing that, and keep banging the drum, because it's really inspiring to see.
yeah. Thank you. Cheers. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Andy. And yeah, that was really enjoyable.
Cheers. Thanks, Dave.
Take care. All right. Cheers. Bye
Bye.
bye now.